is patriotic to be outspoken.
We are millions strong, and we want another world.
Don't give up.
It's exciting to write books that I wanted to see in the world.
This has been the most rigorous medication rollout this world has ever seen.
School's not prison. Get loud!
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to CalEndow Live. Thank you so much to everyone for coming. My name is Kris Hayashi, and I'll be moderating our conversation this evening. My pronouns are he, him, or just Kris, and I'm honored to serve on the board of the California Endowment. For my day job, I serve as the executive director of the Transgender Law Center. We are the largest national trans ed organization in the country. So before we dive into our discussion, I first want to remind everyone tuning in that this conversation is being recorded and it will be posted on the California Endowment's website tomorrow. We'll also send a link to everyone of the recording. You can share it with friends who couldn't make it here this evening, or if you want to take another look for yourself. Before turning to our powerful panel, I want to introduce Frida Bloom, who will be providing Spanish language interpretation services for us tonight. Frida has some instructions about tuning into the audio feed in Spanish.
Thank you, Kris. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this forum. My name is Frida, and I'll be your interpreter. Muy buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos a este foro. Mi nombre es Frida y seré su intérprete. In order to provide language access, this meeting will have simultaneous bidirectional interpretation in English and Spanish, and I'll explain how to enable the feature in Spanish. A efecto de proporcionar acceso lingüístico, esta reunión contará con interpretación simultánea bidireccional al inglés y al español. Si usted es bilingüe, no tiene que presionar nada, pero si usted no es bilingüe y está en su computadora, localice el icono en forma de globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla, haga clic en interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione español o Spanish. Si está usando su iPad o su teléfono, entonces busque el menú de 3 puntos o que dice More en una de las esquinas de su pantalla, haga clic en interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione español o Spanish y después aceptar, finalizar o done. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frida. Language justice is so important to our movements. So let's get started. We are so fortunate to have a very special panel with us tonight. It's really a panel of legends, as someone said earlier. Over the next hour, we're going to hear from a group of incredibly dynamic trans and non-binary leaders. Our panel includes elected officials, artists, advocates, and more. So we're going to talk about some tough and challenging issues tonight because those are the realities facing our communities as trans people. But I want us to start by really grounding in the beautiful, powerful, celebratory, and joyful ways that as trans people, we have always survived and thrived. So in that spirit, I'm going to bring in the members of our panel one by one. As each panelist joins us, I'm going to ask each of them the same question, which is, what does trans joy mean to you? So first up is Andrea Jenkins. Hey, Andrea. Andrea was elected to the Minneapolis City Council in 2017 and was named president of the council by her colleagues earlier this year. When she's not busy on so much city work, Andrea is a poet and a performance artist. Andrea, welcome so much to CalEndow Live tonight. And please tell us, what does trans joy mean to you?
Hello, Kris and CalEndow and everybody in the audience. I wish I could see you all's faces, but I know you're beautiful. Trans joy for me. So this past November, I had the pleasure, the honor to officiate a trans wedding. And 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago when I first came out, I thought I would have to eschew love. I would have to eschew family relationships, maybe even work, the ability to earn a living for myself. And none of those things became my reality. But what did become a reality is I was able to join in matrimony, two trans-identified people that married each other. That to me is a symbol of joy. It's a symbol of the amount of progress that we have made in this community. Over 100 people showed up to celebrate this wedding, and it was not all trans community. There was a lot of trans community, but it was people from all walks of life, all orientations, all sexualities. So that's trans joy.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It's so good to have you here with us tonight. You are such an inspiration to all of us, and just so much love and appreciation for everything you're holding down, particularly just so inspirational, the work that you did in Minneapolis in 2020 in the height of the uprising. So thank you. Next, I'd like to invite in Bamby Salcedo. Bamby is president and CEO of the Trans Latina Coalition, which advocates for trans Latinas in California and throughout the United States. Bamby is a tireless activist, and she has brought important visibilities to issues facing transgender people overall, but specifically to raising up the issues that trans migrants face. Bamby, can you also tell us what does trans joy mean to you?
Bueno, primero que nada quiero dar gracias a mi poder superior por darme la oportunidad de estar aquí. Quiero honrar la tierra en la cual estamos y les saludo de la tierra de los Tangba, y también quiero honrar la presencia de todas las personas. Hello everyone, and I know that it was hard for some of you to understand what I just said, but it is always my custom that I always introduce myself in my native language, and I also honor the land where we're standing on today, and I'm greeting you from Tangba land in Los Angeles. And I also honor the beautiful and amazing people who are joining us today. Thank you so much for this question, Kris, because, this is not a question that is often asked to many of us, right? Because unfortunately, joy in our communities, because of the systemic issues that we continuously encounter, right? It's hard to really take a moment and understand what really joy is. And so for me, joy is really when I see the sparkle in the eyes of my people, transgender, non-conforming, intersex individuals, who come to our organization with broken souls, and when I see how dim their light is in their eyes at first, but then when I see how they blossom as the beautiful and amazing people that they are, and when I get to see the sparkle in their eyes, that brings so much joy to me, but also it feeds my soul tremendously. And it is a testament that, I'm supposed to be doing what I'm doing. And so that certainly, fills my spirit with joy.
Thanks so much, Bamby. It's so amazing to have you here. I mean, both of us have been in this work for a minute, and it's just been amazing to see the ways in which the Trans Latina Coalition has grown from like a small grassroots org to now multi-million-dollar organization. So thank you so much for being here. Next, I'd like to invite in Janetta Louise Johnson, Executive Director of the Transgender Gender Variant Intersex Justice Project. A San Francisco-based activist, Janetta is especially well known for advocating for the rights of transgender people in prisons jails, and other detention facilities. Janetta, thank you so much for joining us. And if you could also answer the question, what does trans joy mean to you?
Okay, I wanted to say hello to everybody and thank you all for inviting us all here. And I'm so happy to be on this panel with such esteemed people that have done so much work in building this community. And when that question came up, I was very excited about it. And maybe that's because I have sort of kind of been working half-time and gotten a lot more rest. And I haven't participated in any direct client services. I've been doing that work for 26 years. So it's time for me to step away from that. And I'm so happy that I also wanted to name that I am the CEO of TGIJP, and Sharon Grayson is the executive director there. Being able to create work, being in community with so many trans people that have been able to create some type of sustainability, and that might be mental stability, have enough strength and courage to continue to do this work and help so many different communities that are emerging, particularly supporting other grassroots organizations and being able to build family and communities and just see all the work that we do. But I think the thing that makes me most excited and helpful and brings me joy is to see so many trans people that are having babies. Yeah, that brings me joy, and that gives me a lot of hope that we will have some sane people in the world. No, I don't know. It's just, it just really makes me very, very happy to see so many trans people are having children. Yeah, that brings me joy.
Thank you so much, Janetta. And also just thank you so much for being here. Like, I also remember for TGIJP being a small grassroots org, and now also similar to Trans Latino Coalition, being a multi-million-dollar organization. And also just to name the work that you continue to hold down in terms of supporting and building the leadership of Black trans women and femmes across the country is just incredibly inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you.
So the final member of our panel is Yuan Wang, Executive Director of Lavender Phoenix, an organization dedicated to building queer and transgender power in the Asian and Pacific Islander community, with a special emphasis on grassroots and youth organizing. Welcome. Can you please also tell us what does trans joy mean to you?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking, Kris. I'm so grateful to be here with you, with Bamby, with Miss Janetta, with Andrea. I think to me, trans joy is the feeling of comfort, the feeling of safety and security in my body when I walk into a room and I do not have to question whether I belong. And I do not have to question whether I will be safe here and whether people will look to me with curiosity, with care, and with kindness instead of violence. And I think that's unfortunately, that's the kind of joy that so many trans folks never get to experience so rarely. Yeah, but Kris, you were saying earlier that part of why we're asking this question is kind of to ground in joy, to ground in excitement, even as we talk through some hard stuff. And yeah, I think that, even as I see like all of us here together right now, I'm just reminded that so much of what makes us scary to conservative forces is that we live outside of binaries and we live outside of restrictions. And I think just getting to be trans, non-binary, intersex, those things are a joy. Yeah, thank you, Kris.
Thank you. And thank you also so much for being here. I just continue to be inspired by the work of Lavender Phoenix and the ways in which you all continue for many, many years to hold down strong narratives around the violence that Asian communities face, with an understanding that our solutions can't contribute to increased incarceration and violence against Black communities, brown communities, and other communities that we're part of. So just thank you. So again, thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. This is going to be an incredible conversation. To the audience, welcome again. And I want to really encourage you to put comments in the chat, questions you'd like to ask the panel, Our agenda tonight is definitely packed and there's a lot of brilliance on this panel, but we will get to as many questions as we can. So let's just get into the conversation. I'd like to start out first with addressing a question to Andrea. So you were first elected to the Minneapolis City Council with 74% of the vote. That is incredible. Can you tell us about your decision to run for office? Why did you decide to run for office? And was advocating for trans rights an important part of your campaign?
Yeah, I ran in 2017, which is just right after the country elected the orange idiot that was our president. And, I thought to myself, democracy is under attack, that the real change is going to come in cities across the country because state legislatures are dominated by Republicans, mostly around the country, the United States Senate. So, I really saw municipal government as a place to really make direct change. I think the 74% of support that I received then was a testament to the fact that I knew this community, that I had been, showing up and speaking up for marginalized communities for the past 25 years prior to getting elected. I worked for 2 elected officials, so people knew me. And I think that really contributed to the 74%. This most recent election, in 2021, I was reelected and I got 84% of the vote. And that was after a global pandemic, after a racial uprising unlike any we've seen, globally ever. And so, I think that speaks to the fact that people appreciate how I'm showing up in this work, to be a part of the solutions that are really plaguing our American cities. I show up as a trans person, openly trans, identified African-American every place I go. So, yes, to answer your question succinctly, it played a role in my campaign, as it does in every conversation that I find myself engaged in. I'm always, when I'm in Black communities, I am bringing up issues around trans and gender nonconforming folks. When I'm in LGBTQIA plus spaces, I'm bringing up the issues and concerns of, the Black and brown communities of color. So that's how I show up all the time, Kris.
Thank you. So the next question will be to the whole panel. So this year, which has been true actually for a number of years at this point, there has been a flood of anti-trans policies being introduced at school boards and in state legislatures all across the country. So to the whole panel, why do you think there's been such a major increase in anti-trans policies, anti-trans legislative attacks? And is there any particular policy or attack that you're the most concerned about? Can I, Bamby, can you open us up on this question?
Yeah, well, thanks so much. This question it really is something that is the reality that we're experiencing right now, right? Obviously, it really depends on where you are, right? We know that, other states that are super conservative and they're using our community to, for political reasons, right? And they have always, attack us, right? And just use excuses, to, in many different ways, generate violence against us, right? And that is no surprise that, Black trans women and followed by Latina trans women, right? Like are the ones who are constantly murdered, right? And so all of these things are things that generate institutional violence, obviously, but also translates into interpersonal violence, right? And so I think it's also important to understand that, again, it really depends on where you are in the country and how this manifests in people's lives. But I also want to say that even here in California, right? Many people think that we live in a progressive state and all of this, but transgender, non-conforming, and intersex people continue to struggle to have access to basic things, right? And these are things that are generated because of these messages that not just elected officials, but also, the general public, right? Like get about who we are, about, messages about like we're not supposed to exist, right? Like in these policies, obviously, or legislations and attacks, right? Are really the drivers for us to continue to be in a position to where we are today. And so I do want to emphasize that, just because we're in California, that the lives of our community are better, our social conditions continue to be the same. And so we need to really be aware of those things and continue to organize and to push against those narratives, right? That continue to say that we are not worthy, that we're not supposed to be here, that we're not supposed to exist. And so I'm super grateful for all of the work that, members of this panel do, but also, members of our community across the United States continue to do, like we are resilient people and we continue to resist despite the continuous attacks that our community continue to experience.
Cool, thanks, Bamby. Yuan, I wonder if you would want to add also to this question in terms of why we're seeing this escalation in anti-trans attacks.
Definitely. I love what Bamby said. And I think the most important part to me is that in the midst of so much crisis where state after state, town after town is dealing with these laws, it's critical that on the progressive left, we need to be able to zoom out and see the political and the narrative battle that is taking place over trans bodies right now. When we zoom out and think about this in generations, we can see that every time a group's people power has grown, there has been a counter punch from the right. And over the past 3 or 4 decades, trans power has grown significantly. So I think it's no coincidence that now the right is using the lives of trans people, using the ability for young trans kids to access healthcare, using the ability for trans kids to play the sports that they want as firebrand issues to motivate their base. Here in San Francisco, police have criminalized trans folks for decades in order to push the narrative that they are more necessary, that trans folks cause violence, which we know is not true, and that the police are a necessary solution. So I think that one of the biggest problems, it's not just that these laws are emerging, but it's that our movements to respond aren't equipped, they're siloed. So that when I'm in movement spaces, often, y'all, I have to do so much work to help teach and explain that trans justice work is racial justice work, that trans justice work is economic justice work. We're seeing that if attacking trans folks is becoming the fulcrum by which the right is winning power, then trans folks need to be the leaders of the left's strategy to respond. And for so long, that has not been a possibility. So I know that if we are not able to break down those silos, if we're not able to move Trans Latino Coalition, TGIJP, other trans BIPOC leaders around the country into the leadership of our progressive movements, we are going to see some really disappointing slide backs in our power and our safety in years to come. I think there's a big opportunity here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Janetta, do you want to add on to this question in terms of why you think we're seeing this escalation in anti-trans policies, legislative attacks?
I just wanted to say that when all these different unsavory legislations and attacks come up against trans people, I always think about trans youth, and I think about how are they interpreting this, what are they saying to themselves, how do they feel, hearing this information that, at such a very young age, how it impacts them and scare them into being their full self authentically. And that is always a concern for me. And it also takes me back to when I first moved to San Francisco and I started doing this work under the leadership of Miss Major and Sharon Grayson. And I remember the very first protest that I went to, it was for people that did not look like me, did not live like me. And I was just like, I asked Miss Major, I said, why are we here? These aren't our folks. These aren't our people. This is not. And she just basically told me that we support their cause and we fight with them because if they get rid of them, we will be next. So it was just like, that is something that really rang home to me as a trans person, just starting to do like movement work and understanding why the work we do is so important and why we don't always want to fight. I promise you, we don't always want to fight, but sometimes, certain things happen that we as a community have to push back against for our community safety.
Thank you, Ms. Janetta, and thank you for bringing Ms. Major into the space. Andrea, do you want to add anything to this question around why we're seeing this escalation in anti-trans policy legislative attacks?
Certainly I would just add to everything that everyone said. I agree with that. And it really speaks to the notion, so I'll speak to the positive piece, because trans people have been going to the bathroom since the beginning of time. And I'm pretty sure we're gonna keep doing that. We're humans. And it hasn't been a problem, right? Up until, these more recent times. But what I will say is that we are in an age now, particularly to Janetta's point, where young people can look up to see Bamby Salcedo as the president and CEO, Kris Hayashi as the president of a trans-led organization, see Andrea Jenkins as the president of the Minneapolis City Council, or Yuan. The other day I'm watching this show called The Shy, and I see Lorraine. I'm like, that's my girl, right? So we're in all of these spaces, all of these places. I didn't have that 30 years ago, Janetta, when I came out. That realization that even though they talking crazy about me, I'm looking at all of these role models, these possibility models that are out there. I'll bring Laverne into the space, these possibility models. There's a Barbie doll, that is in the image of Laverne Cox. So, I think the backlash is because we are so powerful, as Bamby said, that we are really changing the dynamic of what it means to be a human being, what gender is, the expansiveness of gender, which is why the governor of Florida don't want the kids talking about it, because they are shifting what it means to be a human being on this planet. That's really important work, and they are trying to shut that down. So, but I want to think of the positive aspects, that there are all these role models out here you know, the Secretary of Human Services, the, what do you call it, Surgeon General is a trans woman. So, you know, I am optimistic about the future, even with all of these unscrupulous attacks. Yes, Dr. Rachel LaValle, thank you. All of these unscrupulous attacks on our communities.
Thank you. So I know we're about halfway through, and I would love to start with you, Janetta. I want to ask some questions that really can showcase just the really powerful work that you all the panelists are doing, particularly here in California. You know, I know that TGIJP for many, many years has led work in terms of criminal justice and working with our partners in terms of decarceration. Can you just share a little bit more about this work? I mean, there have been some historic wins. I mean, I remember like 7 years ago, we were like, what if there was a trans prisoner bill of rights? And then now y'all made that happen. So yeah, I would just love if you could talk more about your work.
Thank you. Yes, we have been doing some things and major roles and working on making major changes in discussing trans safety, you know, transformative justice, reentry services, and legal advocacy to really try to create better opportunities for the trans community that are being held captive in California prisons, and with looking under the lens of like impacting the entire United States on how trans people are not given the access that they need for safety, because it's really about the big thing for me around trans people is safety and being, you know, having safe opportunities and not being in spaces where they could be caused more harm, and giving people the option to just feel better about certain situations, and just kind of like building up their spirits and, you know, providing hope and better access to opportunities. And a large part of our work is undoing a lot of the stuff that the prison industrial complex has done to trans people. And I think about, you know, there's been these broad conversations around mental health services for trans people coming directly out of prison, and thinking that, I mean, I don't know how many people know, but there is no access for mental health care for trans people in prison. There is absolutely no mental health care for trans people. Any issues that trans people have to deal with mental health services, it is basically an opportunity for them to put them in a place where alleged for their safety, but it's just a single person cell, because they're not equipped and they're not set up to address those issues. And we're doing our job is to undo a lot of the stuff that has been done to trans people during custody, and also just naming that we're finding more and more that a lot of our folks that are compounded with that trauma coming out of prison that have also been part of the foster care system, which makes our work a lot harder. But just providing a lot more subsidized opportunities and keeping people as safe as we can until they get here. You know, TGIJP is that surrogate family that a lot of trans people come home to. And so, yeah.
Thank you, Janetta. And, you know, I know that TGIJP does so much. And I just always remember at the start of COVID, how you were literally on the streets of San Francisco, handing out masks, giving people information, specifically Black trans folks who had formerly been incarcerated, because you know that if you didn't, that no one else would. So just thank you for all the work that TGIJP does.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to turn it to Bamby. Would love for you also to talk a bit more about your work. I know the Trans Latino Coalition has really led in terms of work around trans migrant communities, folks in ICE detention. But I also know that you do so much more, including some really groundbreaking work around health and wellness in the state. So we'd just love for you to talk a little bit more about you.
Yeah, thanks, Kris. Like when we started in 2009, obviously, I love that Andrea talked about, possibilities, right? I remember when we started, the Transgender Law Center and other, there was only like a couple trans-led organizations. Obviously, TGJIP was there, and so, certainly an inspiration, right? But our focus primarily, our work primarily focused on, trans Latina immigrant women at the time, right? Because, and I'm talking about when it wasn't popular, right? I remember, we started as a volunteer-based organization, like going and do visitations and putting, raising money to put money on people's commissary and, picking people up and taking them to, supportive services and stuff like that. And so, as we were seeing the inability for our community to have access to basic services, right? Our national group decided that we also needed to move into doing service provision. And so, so that's why, we started building the center here in Los Angeles. And, we officially got our first grant in January 2016. And we have built a multiplicity of services specifically designed and cater to support transgender, non-conforming, and intersex people, right? Because we believe that we believe in empowering our community directly through service provision, right? Because you can organize people if people are struggling with, to get food or housing and things like that, right? And so our work has shifted, right? So the work that we do as an organization, it's not just for trans, migrants, right? Yes, the vast majority of people who come here are trans migrants, but we have contributed to the broader trans movement in different ways because we also do policy, and have influenced policy changes nationally and and here in California specifically, and and so I think I really love also what Yuan talked about the opportunity that we have, right? Because I also love what Andrea talked about, the positive aspect of things, right? But the reality is that again we continue to struggle to have access to basic things, right? And I do want to say that we are in a great time. There's a great opportunity right now, particularly the work that the California Endowment is leading in terms of like equity and investment and accountability to community and particularly the report that they release for social bond and health service investment, right? Like that is going to happen. And I'm super excited on how particularly the California Endowment, right? Like leading this effort for others to follow and understanding the infrastructure development that needs to happen in our community so that we can continue to, not just survive, right? But move into thriving, right? Because again, you started this conversation with joy, right? Like, but the truth is that, again, many members of our community, do not have that opportunity. And so if we want to build, healthy trans people, right? Like there needs to be an intentional and meaningful investment in the lives of transgender, non-conforming, and intersex people, right? And so You know, I know that, you know, we are definitely committed in moving into that, right? And I know that TGJIP is also doing that. And I know many other groups and organizations that want to do that, but don't have the resources to do that, right? And so I think, although there is an opportunity to invest in the broader infrastructure development that needs to happen in the trans, gender nonconforming, intersex community, right? There's also a responsibility that comes with that, right? Because we can't just say or put, you know, reports or, you know, put cute words that look good, right? But then don't do what we said that we're going to do. And so I'm really excited about, you know, the future, as Andrea was saying, and you know how we as an organization also are supporting other trans-led organizations, how we have built the California Trans Policy Alliance, right? And we are, you know, making sure that we contribute to the infrastructure development that needs to happen in our community. But obviously we need those who do have the power to make those investments happen.
Thanks so much, Bamby. Absolutely. So Yuan, I want to turn to you. So, you know, Lavender Phoenix has a new name, super exciting, love it. And, you know, you all have been working for so many years to build up queer and trans API power. We'd just love to hear you chat a bit more about you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kris. And just want to like clap it up for every group that spoke so far. These are some of the folks I admire most. Yeah, so Lavender Phoenix was founded almost 20 years ago, and it was founded in response to a march of thousands of mostly Chinese immigrant folks in the Sunset in San Francisco marching against gay marriage. And there was a group of trans and queer young API folks who said, you know, that's when we walk out of our homes and we see that in our neighborhoods, it reminds us that we are unsafe. What is the work we have to do to counter that narrative? So from our early days, even though the focus of our work may have been on marriage equality, it was always about the healing and about the safety of our people. And over the past decade, we've made a big shift, and I really resonated with a lot of what Bamby said. We've made a big shift towards not just focusing on one specific policy or one specific measure as our door to liberation, but focusing on grassroots organizing, developing the leadership of trans API people here in the Bay and beyond, working on healing justice and meeting folks' dire mental health needs, and also building real community safety. We know that so many folks come to Lavender Phoenix because they are feeling isolated and they're feeling unsafe, but they don't have anyone to turn to because they do not have the relationships they need, and the systems that exist are just looking to hurt them. So we're looking to build skills and alternatives for people to call on. That's a little bit about our work. Yeah, Kris, are there any other things that I can speak about that would be helpful? Or yeah.
I mean, I would love if you could share a little bit about, I mean, I remember us chatting a little bit when the Atlanta mass murders happened, and I feel like you all were so clear about what needed to happen, and that it actually was what we had been calling for so long. I wonder if you could just chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to, and thanks for asking. Yeah, Kris is reminding us of more than a year ago, in last March in 2021, I know I and everyone here woke up to the news that 6 Asian women, massage workers, had been killed in Atlanta. And I remember waking up and feeling just frozen to my bed, angry, full of grief, scared for people that I knew and people whose friends and parents were massage workers and working in spas and salons. And I remember one of the hardest parts about that day was that as I eventually got up to go make some breakfast, I remember getting email after email telling me that folks were donating to Lavender Phoenix. It wasn't something that we'd asked for or petitioned for. It was just something that was happening in the wake of crisis. And to be honest, I stood there and I felt sick. I felt sick to my stomach, and I felt angry because, and I'm curious, I imagine Bamby, Janetta, Andrea, we've probably all been in these moments where something horrifying has happened to our community, and it is only then that everyone else has responded to support us. But like you said, Kris, for years, and before we were an organization, our elders for generations have been calling for safety that doesn't involve the police, to take care of each other, to build real and lasting relationships. And so I think as an organization in that moment, we had to really ask ourselves, why is it that folks are only moving resources to our work when our people are dying? When it's in life that we need to be celebrated and protected and loved. And so I think since then, it's only redoubled our efforts to say, in addition to responding to those moments and, holding vigils, I know Janetta came and joined us out there last year and sat as we grieved those folks that we had lost. And we had over 200 trans API folks just gathered in Oakland, being with each other, holding each other, processing that, but also committing to say, okay, how are we going to keep each other safe now? And so over the past 2 years, our community safety committee members have been training each other in crisis intervention, in de-escalation skills, building out phone trees so that people have someone to call on, especially our elders and our youth who are the most isolated during COVID, and also training more than 200 folks in our community on the basic skill of identifying our needs and asking for help, which is something that I know so many trans folks are never told that we have the right to do. So we're trying to build from the ground up what it takes to keep each other safe every day. Yeah, thank you for asking that.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much. Just so much love to all of you for all the work you've been holding down for so long. I want to turn to make sure we get to some of the questions from the audience. And actually, this first question really connects to what Yuan was just talking about. And it's from our friend Aldita in Oakland. Shout out to Fund for Transgenerations at Borealis. Aldita asks, all the members of this panel work on very emotional and often very painful issues. What do you do to take care of yourself? Anyone want to take that on?
I have to say that I know at the beginning of COVID, and particularly working during COVID, like for the first year, like straight through, and getting to that point where I knew I was at my wit's end, and I was like, Janetta, you have to get off these streets. You're gonna fall on these streets working, trying to make sure people are safe. But things worked out where we was able to bring more support to support the team that was supporting the community members that were sleeping in the alleyways in the city and county of San Francisco. And we were very fortunate and blessed to manage, even though, once again, this situation happened and it was this crisis that happened where we were a little bit more supported in housing trans people. And I think our immediate group of people that we housed, like after near the first year, like after 10 months of COVID, we were in a position to house at least 25 Black and brown trans people, and some had partners, but I knew that I had to get a coach. I knew that I had to do something or I was never, ever going to be any more good in this work. And I have been fortunate and blessed and been in position to work with a coach for like the past 2 years. And to me, that has been the best self-care opportunity that I've had. And I also wanted to name that some of the organizations that are probably out there listening are some of the organizations that also supported our organization and making sure that to help us to get coach. But I think for me, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm here because my mother passed away, but I've been here for the past 9 months, and I've never spent this much time in Florida with my siblings in over 20 something years. And for the 9 months that I have been here with my siblings has been such a great joy. And this is kind of like during my coaching process, it was like, what does Black joy mean to you? And it was all about, healing, getting better, taking some little trips with a couple trans community members that are working, and also spending time with my siblings and spending time with all my nieces and nephews. And this was kind of like the first month of me getting into coaching and writing down, what do I want? What do I feel like it's going to take to help me heal, and just having this experience and spending time with all my nieces and nephews and little cousins, and just, because in our family, usually have dinner somewhere at somebody's house, and it's usually here at my sister's house. But just being with community and being in family and reestablishing old relationships with my siblings, and just a lot has really shifted. And also taking time off for myself and relaxing and making sure that I get rest and trying to make sure that I get water. I mean, and one thing that I have experienced since I've been here, I've had breakfast, lunch, and dinner just about every day since I've been here with my siblings. Like they make sure to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and which is something I never do. Is have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Very rarely I have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So, and just, yeah.
Thank you, Janetta. And Andrea, I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I did want to just name that, and thank you for sharing that, Janetta. But that's a difficult question, because, it requires you to do more work. It really does. And it was named that this work is very emotionally and physically challenging. And I named my optimism but I 100% absolutely recognize all the challenges that Black and brown, trans-identified people in particular face as it relates to access to healthcare, access to affordable housing, access to employment, and ability to take care of one's own self. Those are significant challenges to people. So I want to be sure that I acknowledge that. That being said, around getting, self-care as a, means of really trying to take care of oneself in the midst of this struggle. It's a challenge. I see so many of my sisters who are struggling with health issues now, who have been out there on the front line, and myself. I mean, I'm speaking for myself as well. And I was thinking about this earlier today, like, what do we give up to do this work, right? We give up that time with our family. We give up that, just going to, as we are advocating for access to healthcare, are we actually going to the doctors ourselves? Like, that's a challenge for me. But I did just start in May coaching too, Janetta, and it's been enormously helpful. One of the things, and I met with my coach earlier today, in fact, but one of the things that she talks about is helping me to do is taking Friday afternoons off for myself to do medical appointments, nail, nap, read, whatever I need to do to be for myself. So while I do think it's a challenging question, and it's a really difficult for everybody. Because one of the things that I used to really do for self-care, I used to play tennis twice a week. And then, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So now I can't do that anymore, So the one thing that I had found that gave me some support, some strength, some opportunity to reflect and to move my body and be physical, now I don't have that option. So, trying to come up with other means of self-care has been challenging for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I know we're starting to get to the end of our time, and I did want to do a closeout question because there are folks who are definitely asking what we would recommend for people who want to learn more about the community, who want to become better allies, and particularly for parents who have children who've come out as trans or non-binary and gender non-conforming. I'm wondering if there's one or two folks who could take that question.
I'm just going to name Transforming Families. I think they're a great organization for people with young, gender fabulous children to help them. Bamby, you may remember our work at the University of Minnesota. So I will name the Institute on Gender Spectrum Health as a resource for families. Yeah.
Thank you. Bamby, did you want to add?
I just wanted to just simply say that, the first step, right, for families to support young gender non-conforming, individuals or children in this case, right, it really is to understand the concept of unconditional love, right, and love your children unconditionally and support them to the best of your ability. But I know that we're running out of time, but I want to emphasize the importance of, really using this, social bond health system, right, model as a way to invest in the livelihood of trans people, right? There's different levers, that have been created. And I'm just so excited that, the California Endowment has taken this on, and I'm hoping that others take also the lead on that because, there's so much work that needs to happen in our community, and, we need to invest in having Janetta have, her building, having our organization be able to create the space, for us to be able to provide the services that we need to our communities and to do the work that needs to happen, really. And so I just wanted to say that because, I know that we're running out of time, and I hope that, this actualizes and becomes a reality for many of us.
Thank you, Bamby. So I know we are at time and it's all the time we have. And I just want to thank you all, the panelists, so much. I just feel so, my heart feels very full by hearing about your incredible work and leadership. And I know that it is right that it's our communities who really need to be leading and centered in our movements for justice, wellness, and safety for all. So thank you so much. Thank you to the audience for sharing your evening with us. And definitely check your inbox for a link to the recording for this event. Please share it out with friends. I mean, this really is a panel of powerful and legendary leaders. It's a very rare space and opportunity, and I just feel incredibly appreciative. So thank you all, and hope folks have a good rest of your night.